Watch your tone, young lady. This is my line, not your clipboard. Staff Sergeant Dane Garrity said it loud, so the whole firing point would hear it. He wanted them to. He stood over the prone shooters with his hands on his hips, the brim of his cover pulled low. The morning sun already hard off the berm. The wind flag snapped at a quartering angle. 40 Marines lay on the mats at the 500-yard line, rifles forward, and every one of them heard their chief range coach put the civilian in her place. She was 41 years old, blonde hair pulled back tight, plain range clothes, a visitor laminate clipped at her collar, a clipboard held loosely against her hip. She had not raised her voice once. She had said 4 words, level and quiet, and Garrity had decided 4 words was 3 too many. The woman did not answer him. She looked past his shoulder, down the line, at a young Marine on the far mat whose bolt was already back and whose muzzle was already drifting, while a coach stood forward of the line near the lip of the pits. Her eyes went to the coach, then to the bolt, then to the flags. In that order, the way a person reads a page they have read 10,000 times. "Coach is still forward," she said again. The same 4 words, no heat in them. "I run this range," Garrity said. He stepped off the catwalk and onto the firing point, closing the distance, and he was grinning now because 2 of his junior coaches had drifted in to watch. 14 years I've run a line. You walk on with a laminate and a pen, and you think you're going to teach me range safety? Behind the line, ma'am. Civilians stand behind the line." He put the heel of his hand against her shoulder and shoved. It was not a small shove. It was meant to move her, to make a point with his body that his mouth had already made, and a man who shoves expects the other person to stumble. She did not stumble. She rocked back a half step, let the force go through her and into the ground, and was standing exactly where she had been standing, weight already centered, hands still loose. Then he backhanded her upper arm with the flat of his knuckles, a flick, a dismissal, the kind of thing a man does to a door that is in his way. And he laughed. "There you go," he said to his coaches. "Behind the line." They laughed with him. It was easy to laugh with Garrity because Garrity ran the range, and Garrity decided who shot well and who shot again, and a junior coach who laughed at the right time had a smoother week than one who did not. The sound of it rolled down the firing point and broke against the woman, who did not move. She had a way of standing that the laughing men did not notice, and that one man, behind them, did. Her boots were set at the width of her shoulders. Her chin was level. Her eyes had already counted the exits, the brass on the deck, the number of shooters, the tower windows, the position of every coach, and had filed all of it without a flicker crossing her face. The backhand had landed, and her pulse had not moved. There was a stillness in her that did not come from patience. It came from somewhere a range coach had never been. On the far mat, the young Marine, Lance Corporal Milo Hargrove, 21, 3 weeks out of the school, had gone white. He had heard the woman call the safety. He had felt the truth of it in his own hands, the bolt back, the coach forward, the small, cold knowledge that he had been about to do something that ended careers and lives. He looked at her, and then at his own rifle, and his mouth opened, and nothing came out. "Eyes on your lane, Hargrove," Garrity barked, and the boy's face dropped to the mat. Behind them all, at the rail of the tower, Master Gunnery Sergeant Reuben Stark lowered his coffee without drinking from it. Stark was 51, and had spent 33 of those years on ranges exactly like this one, and he had learned a long time ago to watch the person nobody else was watching. Everyone on the firing point was watching Garrity perform. Stark was watching the clipboard lady who had taken a shove and a backhand from a man 200 pounds and had not given him the stumble he wanted. He had seen men flinch. He had seen men freeze. He had seen exactly one kind of person take a blow like that and simply reset their stance as if correcting for wind. And that kind of person did not carry a clipboard for a living. He set the coffee on the rail. He keyed the radio on his shoulder, thumbed it, and then thought better of it and let it go. Not yet. He wanted to watch a little longer. Down on the line, Garrity turned back to his shooters, satisfied, the morning his again. The woman opened her clipboard, clicked her pen, and wrote one line in a small, precise hand. She did not look up when she wrote it. She had not looked angry once. The wind flag snapped. The sun climbed. And Master Gunnery Sergeant Stark stood very still at the rail and watched a 41-year-old civilian fold her hands and wait for a morning that only she seemed to know was already over. Garrity was not finished with her. Men like Garrity were never finished. Humiliation, to them, was a debt the other person owed, and he had decided the clipboard lady owed him for the 4 words. He waited until the relay cleared and the shooters came off the mats, and then he raised his voice again so the line would gather. "Tell you what," he called to her, walking the catwalk with his thumbs in his belt. "You like my line so much. You like coaching so much. You shoot it." He smiled at his coaches. "Show us something, sweetheart. 500. Let's see what the clipboard can do." "Negative," she said. 1 word. She did not even look up from the clipboard. The flatness of it, no apology, no nerves, no heat, annoyed him more than an argument would have. "No." Garrity spread his hands to the line. "She walks on my range and corrects my coaches, and now she's shy." He found Hargrove in the crowd, the easy target, the boy who had frozen. "Hargrove here can barely keep his rounds on paper. Maybe you can give him a lesson. Or maybe you're all clipboard." He had aimed it at the boy to bait the woman, and it worked, though not the way he thought. She closed the clipboard. She set it down on the bench, square to the edge, and she looked at Garrity for a moment, with an expression that had nothing in it at all. And then she looked at the rifles on the rack. "Whose rifle?" she said. Not a request. A question with the shape of a command. A sergeant pointed to a service rifle on the rack. A good one, well kept. She lifted it the way a person lifts a tool they have lifted 10,000 times. Not heavy, not careful, just known. Her hands found the rifle, and the rifle disappeared into her hands. She checked the chamber. She ran a thumb along the bolt. She brought it to her shoulder once, lowered it, and adjusted nothing anyone could see. Then she looked downrange, and she stopped. It was a small thing. The stop. The coaches did not catch it, but Stark, at the rail, caught it. And so did the part of Hargrove that had grown up around guns, because the woman did not look at the target first. She looked at the wind. She read the flags from near to far, the near flag, the mid flag, the far flag over the 500 berm. And then she read the shimmer of the mirage coming up off the gravel, the boil of it, the way it ran. Her lips moved, barely, a number she gave only to herself. She thumbed the rear sight. She did not ask the range for the dope. She had already taken it from the air. She went down onto the mat without hurry. Her body folded into the prone the way water finds its level, elbows set, cheek to the stock, the sling already doing its quiet work. There was no drama in it. That was the thing the line would remember later. There was no drama in any of it. She breathed. The flag snapped. She waited for the wind to tell the truth between gusts. The first round broke clean. She did not look to see where it went. She worked the bolt, a short economical stroke, and settled, and broke the second round, and worked the bolt, and broke the third. 3 rounds, unhurried, into a quartering crosswind that had been pushing every shooter on the line 3 minutes of angle to the right all morning. Then she came off the rifle, cleared it, locked the bolt to the rear, and laid it down on the mat muzzle downrange, and stood. The pit crew below pulled the target and signaled the spotter, and the spotter at the tower put his glass on it and went quiet, and then keyed the line, 500, the spotter said over the speaker, and there was something careful in his voice. 3 rounds. 1 hole. The wind had a vote that morning, and she had overruled it. 3 rounds, 1 ragged hole, the size of a fist, dead in the center of the black at 500 meters in a crosswind. On the firing point, nobody laughed. The coaches who had laughed at the backhand stood with their mouths a little open, and the laugh was gone from the morning as if it had never been there. A young shooter near the front whispered the number to the man beside him. 1 hole? And the man did not believe him and put his own glass on the target, and then went quiet too. It was not the kind of shooting a person learned at this range, or any range. It was not a parlor trick or a lucky string. It was the shooting of someone who had done it when the target was not paper, who had folded into the prone 1,000 times in places with no benches and no tower and no second chance, and the line could feel the difference even if it could not name it. A clipboard does not put 3 rounds in 1 hole at 500 in a crosswind. A clipboard does not reset its stance when a staff sergeant backhands it. The morning had a wrongness in it, now that every Marine on the mats could feel, and only one of them, up at the rail, could read. Garrity's grin held for 1 second longer than his eyes did. Then it failed. At the rail, Stark said 2 words to no one, very quietly. I've seen that group before. Years ago. A different range, a different war. A brief that came down with the shooter's name blacked out, and a call sign where the name should be. He had not been able to put a face to it then. He was beginning to put a face to it now, and the face belonged to a woman a staff sergeant had just shoved off the firing point and called sweetheart. Garrity covered the failure of his grin the only way he knew how, with anger. He looked at the woman, and the woman looked back at him with no triumph in her at all, which was worse, and he decided in that moment that the clipboard lady was a problem he was going to make disappear before the day was out. Humiliation in a man like Garrity did not cool. It looked for somewhere to go. By the time the next relay was on the mats, he had turned the whole machinery of his little kingdom against the woman, and the machinery was practiced because he had run it on others before. It started with the name. He gave her one, the way men like him always do, a name that was small and sticky. Clipboard. He said it to a junior coach, and the junior coach said it to another, and within 20 minutes, it had traveled the length of the firing line, past mat to mat under the noise of the rifles, until it stopped meaning a woman and started meaning a thing you were allowed to ignore. Clipboard. Keep her behind the line. Clipboard's in the way. Then came the blockade. There were good firing points and bad ones, points where a coach could see and be seen, and points back behind the ready line where a person stood in everyone's blind spot, and Garrity made sure the woman was steered to the bad ones. A coach stepped into her path, friendly as anything, and walked her back. Another found a reason she could not stand where the shooters were. They boxed her politely, the way a practiced crew boxes anyone who threatens the order of a place, and they did it with smiles, so that later no one could point to the moment it had happened. She let herself be moved. She went where the bodies steered her, and she said nothing, and she watched. That was the part Garrity did not understand, because Garrity measured people by how loud they got when you pushed them, and the woman did not get loud. She stood where they put her, behind the ready line, and her eyes did the work. She watched the times. She watched which shooter was hazed and which was favored. She watched a coach pencil a score that the target did not earn. Her wristwatch was turned face inward against the pulse of her wrist, the way a person wears a watch they do not want catching light, and every so often she glanced at it and then made a small mark on the clipboard they had all decided was a joke. She was not keeping a grievance. She was keeping a record. There is a difference, and the difference is everything, and not one man on that line knew which one he was standing inside of. Then Garrity reached for Hargrove. The boy had committed the one unforgivable sin. He had taken the woman's correction as true. He had said it out loud, even low, to the Marine next to him. She was right. My bolt was Bkvark, and it had gotten back to Garrity the way everything on a range gets back, and Garrity did not tolerate a shooter who agreed with the clipboard. "Hargrove," he said it like a sentence. "You're in the pits. Go pull targets." It was a punishment, and everyone knew it. The pits were the hot, deafening, thankless hole below the berm, where a Marine pasted targets all day in the dark and the noise. Garrity was separating the one honest witness from the woman, and burying him under the line at the same time, and he was enjoying it. "Staff Sergeant," Hargrove started, I should have checked my bolt. Ma'am was pits, Hargrove." The boy looked at the woman. She gave him nothing that Garrity could see. But as he passed her, on his way down to the dark, she said one thing, very low, that the others did not catch. "You told the truth. Keep doing it." And Hargrove, who had expected to feel like a coward all the way to the pits, found that he did not. If you have ever watched a place close ranks against the one person who was right, the meeting where the honest voice gets walked out, the crew that punishes the man who reported the broken machine, then you already know the particular heat of this part of the story, and you already know how rare it is to see it answered. Stay with it. It gets answered. Subscribe to Honor Tales and stay on the line, because the morning is not over, and the people doing the laughing have no idea what they have already done. The woman closed the clipboard. She set the pen in the spiral, on the top sheet, beneath the columns of times and names in her small, exact hand. There was one entry circled twice, and only she knew what it was. Social was not enough for Garrity. Social could be denied later, laughed off, called a misunderstanding. He wanted the woman gone from his range, and he wanted a reason on paper, because paper was the one weapon a man like him truly trusted. So he went to the range log. The range log was a legal document. It recorded who fired, when, under whose control, and most of all, every unsafe condition and how it was resolved. It was the spine of the morning. It was signed. It was the thing investigators read first when something went wrong on a range, and it was supposed to be true. Garrity took it off the clipboard rack at the tower, and he made it lie. He found the 940 entry, the one that recorded the moment the woman had called the safety. Coach forward, bolt back, condition corrected. And he rewrote the morning. In his version, the unsafe condition had been caused by an unauthorized civilian advancing onto the firing point during a hot relay. In his version, the chief range coach had identified the hazard and removed the civilian to the rear. He wrote it in the clean block letters of a man who had written 100 logs, and he signed it. And then he found a junior coach and had him initial it as a witness, and the junior coach initialed it because Garrity ran the range, and you did not refuse Garrity a signature. It was a small forgery and a large crime. He had taken the truest record on the range and turned it into a weapon aimed at the one person who had been right. Then he went and found the boy. "Hargrove." Garrity caught him coming up out of the pits, sweat-soaked, ears ringing. "What do you think you saw this morning? The bolt. The lady. None of it happened. You understand me?" "Staff Sergeant, your quals disappear, Hargrove." He said it flat and close. "One word from you, and I lose your scorecard, and you refire the whole course in August in the heat. And maybe you fail it. And maybe you're back home by Christmas. Are we clear?" The boy's jaw worked. "Clear, Staff Sergeant," he said, because he was 21, and his whole life was a scorecard in a folder that this man controlled, and he hated himself for saying it. The woman saw all of it. She could not hear the words, but she did not need to. She read the geometry of it, the close stance, the bowed head, the threat in the shape of a man leaning over a boy. And she read the range log too. When Garrity hung it back on the rack, she passed it. Once, the way a person passes a thing they are not supposed to care about. And her eyes went down the sheet to the 940 entry, and the entry did not match what she had written on her own clipboard, and her face did not change at all. Stark fell into step beside her at the rail. "You all right?" he asked. He meant the shove. He had been turning the morning over, and he didn't like the shape of it. "Fine," she said. Then, because she had clocked the altered sheet, and because something in the old master gunnery sergeant's eyes told her he wasn't part of Garrity's machine. "Watch the log." 2 words. She walked on. Stark stood at the rack a long moment. Then he took out his phone, and he photographed the range log as it currently read, Garrity's version. And then he went and found the original morning sheet that the new entry had been copied over, the working sheet still on the spare clipboard, the one with the woman's actual 940 in the controlling NCO's hand, and he photographed that too. He laid the 2 of them side by side on the screen, the true and the false, and he stood there in the sun with the rifles cracking behind him and felt the morning tilt under his boots. He had a doctored safety log in one hand and a woman who shot one whole groups at 500 in the other, and the math those 2 facts made was starting to frighten him. He did not yet know her name. He only knew that men forged safety records to bury people, and that the person being buried this time had taken a backhand, without blinking, and had told him, quietly, to watch the very thing he was now holding. He looked down the line at Garrity, laughing again, the morning his again. And Reuben Stark, who had spent his life keeping ranges safe, decided he had watched long enough. Stark stopped watching and started confirming. And a master gunnery sergeant with 33 years on the deck has ways of confirming that a staff sergeant does not think about. He went to the range office first, to the visitor manifest, the sign-in sheet every civilian filled out at the gate. He ran his finger down the laminated names until he found her. The handwriting was small and exact, the same hand from the clipboard. The billet line, the block where a visitor wrote their purpose, did not say consultant. It said something that stopped his finger cold. It listed a battalion. It listed a billet that would not be filled until the following week. The billet was commanding officer. Stark read it 3 times. The weapons training battalion was getting a new commander in 7 days. The whole base knew it. Nobody had met the officer yet. She was due to report the next Monday for the change of command. And here, on a Tuesday, a week early, was a woman who had signed the visitor log in the billet of the battalion's incoming commanding officer and had let a staff sergeant shove her off a firing point and call her sweetheart. He stepped behind the tower where the engines and the rifles would cover his voice, and he made a call. There was a sergeant major 2 posts over that Stark had bled next to a long time ago, a man who knew where bodies were buried because he had helped carry some of them. Stark gave him the name off the manifest. He waited. He listened. And what came back to him, after a long pause and a lowering of the other man's voice, was not a rank or a billet. It was a single word. A call sign. "Crescent," the sergeant major said. "You're standing next to Crescent?" "Reuben, whatever's happening on that range, you fix it. Now." Stark closed his eyes. 14 years fell away. He remembered a brief that had come down to the senior enlisted, a study of an Overwatch action in a place he was not allowed to name, where a 2-person element had been compromised on a ridge, and 1 Marine had held a position alone, wounded, and kept a pinned patrol alive round by round until the extraction got out. The shooter's name had been blacked out of the document. Where the name should have been there was a call sign, and the call sign had been Crescent, and the group the shooter could put on a target at distance had been the kind of thing instructors showed you and said, "This is what a lifetime looks like." He had seen that group again this morning, on his own range, in the dust, at 500, 3 rounds, 1 hole. He walked back out to the firing point with his heart going hard, and he found Garrity at the catwalk, and he took him by the elbow and steered him a step off the line, and he put his mouth close to the younger man's ear, and he said it low, off the record, the only mercy he had to give. "Whatever you think you're doing with that woman," Stark said, "walk away from her. Today, right now. Don't write another word. Don't say another word. Walk away." Garrity pulled his elbow back. He looked at the old man, and he saw, not a warning, but a challenge to his ownership of the range, because that was the only kind of thing a man like Garrity could see. "It's my range, Master Guns," he said, loud enough for the nearest coach to hear. "I've run a line for 14 years. Mind your own lane." Stark looked at him for a long moment. "I'm trying to save you," he said. "You just don't know from what." "I don't need saving from a clipboard." Garrity smiled, and he turned his back on the senior man, and he walked back to his line. "Here is the gap the whole morning has been built on, and you can feel it now, even though the staff sergeant cannot. Every person watching this knows something Garrity does not. The woman behind the ready line is not what the log says, not what the nickname says, not what the shove said. There is a name under the laminate that would empty the blood out of his face, and he is walking toward it with his chin up. If you want to be there when the line finds out, when the right word is finally said out loud, and 40 Marines move at once, subscribe and stay. It is coming, and it is close." Stark watched Garrity walk back to the firing point, back to his kingdom, back to the woman he had hit. The wrong man, Stark thought, had just refused the only warning he was ever going to get. The range fell away. In the summer of 2012, on a ridge no map will name for you, 2 Marines lay under a thermal blanket in the last gray before dawn and waited for a valley to wake up. Sergeant Adrienne Kerr was 27 years old. Beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, lay Sergeant Jonah Sable, 24, her spotter, her second pair of eyes, the steadiest voice she had ever worked behind. They had been in the hide for 19 hours. They would be in it longer. Below them, in the folds of the valley, a patrol of Marines was moving toward a meeting that someone down there did not intend them to survive, and the 2 on the ridge were the only thing watching the high ground that the trap would come from. Sable called the wind in a murmur, the numbers passing between them with no wasted breath, the way they had passed 10,000 times in training and 100 times for real. "Wind's holding. You've got it, Crescent." He had started using the call sign as a joke back when she earned it, and it had stopped being a joke a long time ago. In the hide it was almost tender, the way he said it. "You've got it." She had it. She always had it. That was the thing about Adrienne Kerr that no scorecard ever fully held. The stillness, the way the world narrowed to a single column of air between her and a problem 500 or 800 or 1,000 meters away, the way her pulse slowed instead of climbing when everything tightened. She had been built, somewhere along the way, for the quiet. The valley woke up wrong. The patrol's meeting was an ambush. The high ground Sable had been worried about all night came alive, and in the space of a held breath, the 2 Marines on the ridge went from watchers to the only guns that mattered. Kerr began to work. Round by round, she took the problem apart, buying the men below the seconds they needed to get off the open ground, and Sable called it for her. Steady, steady, until the moment he was not steady anymore. He went still beside her. She did not move the rifle. That is the part she has never told anyone, the part that lives behind her eyes, when a loud man shoves her on a range, and she does not so much as blink. He went still beside her, and the patrol below was not out yet, and the only thing on the earth keeping those men alive was the column of air between her and the ridge, and she stayed in the glass. She stayed in it, while her own blood ran warm down her leg from the shrapnel that had taken Sable and clipped her. She stayed in it, and she worked, alone now, calling her own wind in a whisper that was his voice, and not hers, until the patrol was off the ground, and the extraction birds were inbound, and there was nothing left in the valley to keep alive. Then, and only then, she put her gloved hand flat on the stone beside her, where her spotter had been, and she let one breath out, and she did not let herself have a second one. They carried her off the ridge. She did not let them carry the rifle. She held it across her chest the whole way down, the way you hold the one thing that kept its promise. The patrol she had bought those minutes for. 11 Marines, who would go home and grow older and never know the name of the woman on the ridge, walked off that ground because of a column of air she had held open with her own steadiness while she bled. That was the arithmetic of it, and she had done the arithmetic without flinching, and it had cost her the steadiest voice she had ever worked behind. In a closed room weeks later, with the citation read low, the theater, the year, the act, the thing she had done with a wound in her leg and her partner gone, they hung a ribbon at her throat, light blue dotted with white, and gave her hand a grip that meant more than the metal. She did not smile. She had learned on that ridge the exact cost of noise, that the loud die and the quiet keep the living alive. And after that, quiet was the only language she would ever fully trust. She let the world call her clipboard and consultant and sweetheart, because none of those words could reach the place where the real one lived. Crescent. On the firing point, in the hard noon light, Adrienne Kerr opened her eyes, and Staff Sergeant Dane Garrity, 20 feet away, had a rifle in his hands that he should never, ever have picked up. It happened the way these things always happen, fast and out of a small man's wounded pride. Garrity could not let the morning end with the clipboard ladies group standing as the best shooting anyone had seen on his range in a year. He had to take it back. So he stalked down the firing line to where Hargrove's relay had just gone down on the mats, and he reached past the boy, who had only just come up out of the pits, and he snatched the loaded rifle off Hargrove's mat, without a command, without a clearance, without one word of the procedure. He flogged every other Marine on the deck for skipping. "This is how it's done," he announced, to the woman, to the line, to no one. 14 years. Watch. He never got the rifle to his shoulder. In his fury, he turned with it. Fast, careless, his finger inside the guard and the muzzle coming up off the berm. And for one long, frozen, unforgivable instant, the barrel of a hot rifle swept off the safe lane, up and across, over the heads of the ready line, across the face of the tower where the spotters stood, across 40 Marines, who all saw it happen at once. A muzzle sweep, a loaded weapon, finger on the trigger, swung across human beings on a range. There is no greater sin on a firing line. It is the one thing for which there is no explanation and no second chance. And he did it in front of 40 witnesses with his own name signed at the bottom of the log. She was already moving. She had been moving, in truth, since before he picked it up. The stillness of her was never stillness. It was a held spring, and she crossed the distance to him without hurry and without panic, inside the arc of the swinging muzzle, and her hands closed over the rifle. She did not wrench it. She took it, the way she had taken the rifle off the rack that morning, as if it were a tool that had always been meant for her hands, and she rolled it out of his grip and down, muzzle to the deck, away from every living thing. Her thumb found the magazine release. The magazine dropped into her palm. Her hand swept the bolt to the rear, and a live round arced out and bounced bright on the gravel. And she locked the bolt back and turned the open chamber up to the light. Clear, safe, dead, in 3 seconds, with no wasted motion at all. Then she looked up at him, And for the first time in the whole long morning, Adrian Kerr smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not cruel either. It was the smile of a person reading the last line of a document they already knew the ending of. "You picked up a hot weapon," she said quietly, in anger, on a range, in front of 40 Marines, with your name on the log. She set the cleared rifle down on the mat, muzzle downrange, and straightened. "Do you understand what you just did?" It wasn't a question. It was an inventory. "Who?" Garrity said, and his voice cracked on it, because the smile had reached something in him that the group at 500 had only knocked on. "Who do you think you are?" She did not answer him. She did not need to. The answer was already coming up the access road behind him in a cloud of pale dust. And the answer was riding in a staff vehicle, and on the front bumper of the staff vehicle was a plate with 2 silver stars. Stark, at the rail, saw the plate, and his whole body changed. The junior coaches saw it next and went rigid. And the gravel crunched, and the engine cut, and a door opened, and the morning that Adrian Kerr had known was over since 9:40 was finally, visibly, about to end for everyone else. Major General Lorne Hatcher had come to inspect the range he was about to hand to its new commander. He was 54 years old, lean, gray at the temples, and he stepped out of the vehicle, settling his cover with the unhurried economy of a man who had not been surprised by very much in 30 years. His aide came around the front of the vehicle. The range NCOs began to stir, the call to bring the line to order already rising in someone's throat. Hatcher walked toward the firing point with his eyes going where a general's eyes go, taking the measure of the place. And then his eyes found the woman standing over a cleared rifle with a staff sergeant, white-faced in front of her, and Major General Hatcher stopped mid-stride. For a moment he did not say anything. He looked at her, the way you look at a face you know from another life, a face that does not belong to the dust and the noon glare of this particular range. His expression moved through something private. Then he came to a kind of attention that no one had called, his shoulders settling back, and he said her name into the silence so plainly that it carried the whole length of the line. Colonel Kerr. The word, Colonel, went down the firing point like a current. 40 Marines who had spent a morning hearing this woman called clipboard and sweetheart heard a major general call her Colonel, and something in the air changed pressure. Hatcher closed the last distance, and then, quieter, but not so quiet that the front of the line could not hear it, with a weight in it that was almost gentle, he said the other thing. "Crescent," he shook his head slowly. "They didn't tell me you'd come early." Master Gunnery Sergeant Reuben Stark did not wait for the general's aid. He had been waiting 14 years for a reason to say it, and a lifetime to know it when it came, and his voice came off the tower rail like a round, going downrange, cracking flat and final across the firing point. "Attention on the line!" And the line came up. It came up all at once, the way a thing moves when it is built into the body below thought. 40 Marines off the mats, and the catwalk, and the ready line snapping to their full height, heels together, hands flat, eyes front, the rifles forgotten, the morning forgotten, every coach and shooter and pit Marine who had laughed or looked away, or passed the nickname down the line now standing rigid and silent for the woman they had spent the day stepping around. The clipboard lady was the senior Marine on the deck. The clipboard lady was the incoming commander of the entire weapons training battalion. The clipboard lady was Crescent, and a 2-star general had come to attention to greet her, and now the whole firing line stood at attention with him. Adrienne Kerr did not call them to ease. She let it land. That was the last and truest tell of her. She simply stood, still, and let the silence do what noise never could, her hands at her sides, her chin level, her pulse unhurried, exactly as she had stood when the backhand came. And Staff Sergeant Dane Garrity stood in the middle of it and came apart. It moved across his face in stages, and the line, frozen at attention, watched it happen. First confusion, the reflex grasp for a world in which he was still in charge, in which there had been some mistake. Then disbelief, as the word Colonel Fordon and the word Crescent. And the two stars on the bumper refused to rearrange themselves into anything survivable. Then recognition, the real thing. The cold drop in the gut as every moment of the morning replayed at once behind his eyes. The shove, the backhand, the sweetheart, the nickname, the boy he had threatened, the log he had forged, each one landing now with the full weight of who she actually was. And last, horror, plain and total. The face of a man watching his own life fall off a cliff in slow motion with his name signed at the bottom of it. That's, he started. She's a the laminate says. The laminate, Hatcher said, without raising his voice, says consultant, because Colonel Kerr asked the gate to write consultant. She came a week early to see her battalion the way it actually runs when it doesn't know the commander is watching. His eyes went flat. And now I have two. Hatcher's aide and two of the range NCOs were already moving on Garrity. For the muzzle sweep alone, that was automatic. That was the kind of thing that ended a morning no matter who anyone turned out to be. But Stark came down off the tower with his phone in his hand, and the photographs already open, and he held the screen up where the general could see it. The two range log sheets side by side, the true one and the forged one. The 940 entry rewritten to bury the woman now standing as the senior officer on the deck. General, Stark said, before you decide anything, the range log's been altered. Original and the rewrite, both time-stamped. And there's a lance corporal in the pits who'll tell you why, if the colonel will promise me he keeps his quals for it. He keeps his quals, Kerr said. It was the first thing she had said since the line came up. They walked Garrity off the firing point. He did not resist. There was nothing left in him to resist with. He went past the rows of Marines still locked at attention, past the boy he had threatened, past the bench where a clipboard lay squared to the edge, and as he passed her, he finally understood the woman he had hit. And 40 Marines held their attention around him while he learned it, which was its own kind of sentence, longer than any he would draw later. The reckoning, once it started, did not take long, because the truth had been on paper the whole time, and Garrity had been the one to put it there. Stark's 2 photographs were enough to open it, and the forged log was enough to carry it. A doctored safety record is not a misunderstanding. It is a crime with a signature on it, and the signature was Garrity's. And the junior coach who had initialed the rewrite folded inside an hour and told an investigating officer exactly how it had happened and why. The muzzle sweep gave them the immediate cause to relieve him on the spot. Chief Range Coach was a billet of trust, and he had swept a loaded rifle across 40 people in a fit of temper, and there was no version of that. He walked back. By the time the sun was off the berm, he had been relieved as Chief Range Coach, detained pending investigation, and the formal inquiry into the falsified logs and the pattern of hazing had a case number and a list of names. And the list of names was long, because once the fear of him lifted, the line began to talk. The shooters he had hazed, the scores he had penciled, the Marines he had buried in the pits for crossing him. It came out the way these things come out when the man at the center of them is finally gone. All at once, a year of small injuries surfacing in an afternoon. The morning's clipboard, it turned out, had a record of more of it than anyone guessed. Times and names in a small, exact hand, circled twice where it mattered. They brought Hargrove up out of the pits. The boy came onto the firing point, sweat-soaked and wringing-eared, and braced for the worst. And instead, he found the woman he had called Mom, standing with his scorecard in her hand. She had pulled his target herself. She had scored it herself. "You qualified," she told him. "You'd have qualified this morning if your coach had let you shoot instead of using you to get at me. She signed the bottom of the card and handed it to him. And you told the truth when telling the truth was going to cost you everything you've got. About your own bolt, about what you saw. She looked at him a moment. You called it on yourself, Lance Corporal. That's the whole job. That's the entire job, right there. She had already spoken to Stark. The boy was coming off the line and onto the coaching track to learn the range from the one man on it who had photographed the truth instead of signing the lie. Hargrove tried to say something and could not, and she let him not say it, because she of all people knew that the realest things are the ones you do not make noise about. Here is what a morning like this one is actually about, if you have stayed with it this far, and thank you for staying. It is not about a man being led off a range. That part is almost beside the point. It is about the fact that competence, real competence, the kind paid for in places no map will name, does not need to announce itself, and is owed recognition anyway, and about how rare and how good it is to watch the recognition finally arrive. If that is a thing you want more of, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay with us, because there is always another story and another quiet person the world is about to underestimate. Dusk came down soft over the range. The relays were long finished, the brass swept, the line empty, the wind flags gone slack in the cooling air. Adrienne Kerr walked back out to the 500-yard line alone, a single rifle in her hands, and went down onto the mat one last time the way water finds its level. She did not shoot for a score. She put one cold bore round downrange into the failing light, for the discipline of it, for the man on a ridge in 2012 who had called her wind, and she worked the bolt once after, the small economical stroke, and lay still a moment in the quiet she trusted more than any other thing. Her phone lit on the bench beside her, a message from a number with no name in the spare grammar of the work she had never fully left. Crescent. The glass is yours. Coastal task, far side of the strait. We move when you're ready. She read it once. The strait. The long water and the patient watching. The column of air between her and a problem at distance. The only language she had ever fully trusted. She looked downrange one more time at the single ragged hole still standing in the black at 500 meters where the morning had turned. And then she stood and picked up her clipboard from the bench and walked off the line into the dark with the rifle on her shoulder. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.